You know what they say about first impressions. They're usually wrong, but they stick around like that song you hate but can't stop humming. Today's first impression was supposed to be humanity's grand debut on the galactic stage, all smiles, handshakes, and we come in peace nonsense. Instead, it was shaping up to be the diplomatic equivalent of showing up to a black tie event in your pajamas. Captain Riley Martinez stood at attention in the observation deck of Harmony 1, humanity's shiny new neutral space station that probably cost more than most planets' GDP. Her official title was Security Liaison, which was diplomatic speak for the person with the biggest gun who knows how to use it. Right now, she was watching Ambassador Thornwick give what had to be the most painfully optimistic speech in human history. And so, esteemed friends of the Zephyrian Empire, Thornwick was saying, his voice dripping with the kind of sincerity that made kindergarten teachers seem cynical. We extend our hand in friendship, our hearts in trust, and our future in cooperation. Martinez mentally translated, "Please don't kill us, we'll give you whatever you want." The Zephyrians stood in perfect formation across the ceremonial hall, 12 of them, each about 7 feet tall with gray skin that looked like it had never seen a sunny day. 4 arms each, which Martinez noted was exactly twice as many opportunities to hold weapons. Their leader, General Krex, had the kind of smile that suggested he found small animals delicious. "Your words honor us, Ambassador," General Krex replied, his voice carrying that peculiar accent that made everything sound vaguely threatening. "We too seek understanding between our peoples." Martinez's training kicked in automatically. Micro-expressions, body language, positioning, everything screamed ambush louder than a fire alarm in a library. The Zephyrians' weapons weren't ceremonial despite what the briefing had claimed. Their formation was tactical, not diplomatic. And that pause before understanding could have fit an entire invasion fleet. As a gesture of our absolute trust, Thornwick continued, apparently oblivious to the fact that he was about to win the Darwin Award for interspecies relations. "I've ordered all human security personnel to stand down their weapons." Martinez's hand twitched toward her sidearm. This was the part where, in any reasonable universe, someone would step forward and suggest maybe keeping a few guns handy, just in case. Instead, she watched her fellow security officers dutifully power down their weapons with the kind of cheerful compliance that made her question evolution. Such confidence, General Krex observed, and Martinez could practically hear the mental calculator running behind his black eyes. 12 armed Zephyrians versus 30 unarmed humans. Simple math, really. The ceremonial moment arrived, the traditional exchange of gifts that was supposed to symbolize eternal friendship and mutual respect. Thornwick presented a small crystalline sculpture representing Earth's oceans. General Krex offered what looked suspiciously like a tactical scanner disguised as art. "Beautiful," Thornwick breathed, accepting the device. "The craftsmanship is extraordinary." Martinez wondered if the craftsmanship included hidden weapons or just basic surveillance equipment. Probably both, knowing her luck. That's when everything went sideways faster than a politician's promise during election season. General Krex's hand moved in what could charitably be called a signal, though it looked more like "commence operation, stupid humans." The Zephyrian ceremonial weapons suddenly didn't look so ceremonial. "Surprise," General Krex announced, though his tone suggested he found the whole situation about as surprising as gravity. "Perhaps we should discuss the real terms of our relationship." Colonel Vex, Krex's second-in-command, stepped forward with the kind of swagger that suggested he'd been practicing this moment in the mirror. "Humans," he said, managing to make the word sound like a particularly unpleasant disease, "are remarkably predictable creatures." Ambassador Thornwick blinked with the slow comprehension of someone who'd just realized the nice man offering candy from his van wasn't actually running an ice cream business. "I'm sure we can discuss any concerns you might have. Perhaps we could arrange a cultural exchange program? Or trade negotiations?" Commander Zilt, the Zephyrian's tactical officer, actually laughed. It was the kind of laugh that suggested he found human optimism more entertaining than reality television. "Trade negotiations. How delightfully naive. Martinez counted weapons, exits, and options while maintaining her best harmless human expression. 12 Zephyrians, fully armed, between her people and the airlocks. The station's defensive systems were offline, standard protocol for diplomatic meetings, which now seemed about as smart as using gasoline to put out fires. You see, General Krex continued, pacing like a professor giving a lecture on applied superiority. We've been studying your species for quite some time. Months of careful observation, psychological profiling, tactical assessment. The conclusion was unanimous. And what conclusion was that? Thornwick asked, still apparently hoping this was all some kind of elaborate misunderstanding. That humans make excellent slaves, Colonel Vex replied cheerfully. Obedient, emotional, and blessed with just enough intelligence to follow complex instructions without the troublesome tendency to think for yourselves. The human delegation started murmuring nervously, which was probably the most reasonable response they'd had all day. Martinez remained silent, though internally she was revising her threat assessment from potentially hostile to definitely getting punched in the face very soon. Surely there's been some mistake, Thornwick said, his diplomatic training fighting a losing battle against reality. We came here in good faith, offering friendship and mutual cooperation. Yes, you did, Commander Zilt agreed. Which proves our point perfectly. Any species intelligent enough for interstellar travel but stupid enough to trust aliens they just met clearly requires guidance. Martinez finally spoke up. You know, for a species that claims to be superior, you guys sure do talk a lot. Most competent predators just get on with the hunting part. The Zephyrians turned toward her with the kind of attention that suggested they'd just noticed a particularly interesting bug. General Krex's forearms spread slightly, a gesture that probably meant something insulting in Zephyrian body language. Ah, the security officer, Krex said. Tell me, Captain Martinez, how does it feel to know that your entire military was fooled by simple surveillance drones disguised as trade vessels? About as good as you're going to feel when you realize that underestimating humans is the kind of mistake you only make once, Martinez replied conversationally. Colonel Vex found this hilarious. Underestimating? My dear Primitive, we've cataloged every human military installation, analyzed your tactical doctrines, and assessed your technological capabilities. You're barely capable of defending your own planet, let alone projecting force beyond your solar system. The mouthy one amuses me, General Krex declared. Perhaps we should make an example of her. Demonstrate to the others the futility of resistance. But Ambassador Thornwick stepped forward with the kind of courage that came from being completely out of his depth. Captain Martinez is here as my personal security. Surely we can resolve this through dialogue and negotiation. Martinez looked at him with the expression usually reserved for people who suggested using harsh language to stop asteroids. Ambassador, with all due respect, I think we're past the talking stage and well into the figuring out who's going to survive the next 5 minutes stage. General Krex's smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed designed more for intimidation than actual eating. I like her spirit. It will make breaking it so much more satisfying. Kneel, General Krex commanded, gesturing toward Martinez with 2 of his 4 hands. We'll broadcast your execution across human space. A demonstration of what happens to those who show spirit. Martinez remained standing, which seemed to confuse the Zephyrians. Apparently, they'd expected immediate compliance with the whole execution thing. You know, she said, examining her fingernails with the casual interest of someone discussing the weather for a species that claims to have studied human military doctrine, you guys really didn't do your homework. Colonel Vex raised what passed for an eyebrow. Enlighten us, Primitive. Well, first mistake, you're all clustered together like tourists at a landmark. Basic tactical formation would be to spread out, minimize casualties from area effect weapons. Martinez gestured vaguely at their tight grouping. Second mistake, those weapons you're carrying are designed for intimidation, not efficiency. Too much energy output, too much flash, not enough focused lethality. Commander Zilt's grip tightened on his weapon. Are you lecturing us on warfare? Third mistake, Martinez continued, ignoring the question. You studied our public military doctrine. The stuff we put in textbooks and show at parades. What you didn't study was the stuff we don't advertise. Tech specialist Boomer, who'd been quietly working on a wall panel behind the Zephyrians, caught Martinez's eye and nodded slightly. The station's internal sensors were about to have some very convenient malfunctions. Fourth mistake, Martinez said, noting Lieutenant Pike's subtle shift from unconscious prisoner to coiled spring. You assumed that because we came here for diplomacy, we came here unprepared for war. General Krex's patience was evidently wearing thinner than his understanding of human nature. Enough. Your psychological warfare is as primitive as your technology. I'll give you a sporting chance, he announced magnanimously. We'll count to 3 before firing. Perhaps you'd like to spend your final moments in prayer to whatever primitive deities your species worships. Martinez smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the kind of smile that suggested she'd just been dealt a royal flush in a poker game where everyone else was playing Go Fish. That's really generous of you, she said. 3 whole seconds. You know what I can do in 3 seconds? Die, presumably, Colonel Vex replied. 1. General Krex began. Martinez shifted her weight slightly, a movement so subtle it looked like nervous fidgeting. In reality, she was positioning herself for optimal angles of deflection and minimum exposure to crossfire. 2. Maybe. She flexed her fingers, activating systems that the Zephyrian scans had missed because they'd been looking for weapons. Not personal defense technology that technically didn't exist in any official human military manual. 3. 12 Zephyrian weapons fired simultaneously. The energy output was impressive, enough to vaporize a small building or, theoretically, reduce one human female to component atoms. The blast lit up the ceremonial hall like a miniature sun, and for a moment the only sound was the hum of dissipating energy. General Krex stepped forward, already composing his victory speech about Zephyrian superiority and human inferiority. The other prisoners were staring at the spot where Martinez had been standing, their faces showing the kind of shock that suggested they were still processing what they'd just witnessed. Let this be a lesson, Krex began, his voice carrying the satisfaction of someone who'd just solved a particularly annoying problem, to any human who thinks to challenge. Something moved in the smoke. 23 seconds. That's how long it took for the energy blast's after effects to dissipate enough for clear visibility. It's also exactly how long it took for General Krex's sense of victory to transform into something resembling pants-wetting terror. Captain Riley Martinez stepped out of the smoke, completely unharmed, holding Colonel Vex's severed head in one hand like a grotesque bowling ball. She tossed it casually at General Krex's feet, where it landed with the wet thud of shattered expectations. You know, Martinez said conversationally, for all that talk about studying human capabilities, you really should have invested in better intelligence gathering. The remaining Zephyrians stared at her with the kind of expression usually reserved for discovering that the laws of physics had taken a vacation. Commander Zilt's weapon trembled in his grip, though whether from fear or confusion was anyone's guess. Impossible, General Krex whispered. Our weapons are designed to overwhelm organic tissue with massive energy discharge, Martinez interrupted. Which works great if your target is actually organic tissue. Less effective against experimental energy absorption plating that redirects the blast into the station's power grid. Dr. Walsh, the station's medical officer, started laughing. It was the kind of laughter that suggested she'd been waiting months to see this particular reveal. They scanned for weapons, she explained to the confused Zephyrians. They scanned for armor. They didn't scan for integrated personal defense systems that technically don't exist. Special Operations Division. Ensign Cooper added helpfully, his communications array having recorded every second of the encounter. the unit that isn't in any official records because they specialize in the kind of warfare that violates several interstellar treaties. Martinez brushed imaginary dust off her uniform. See, while you were studying our public military doctrine, we were studying you. Every cultural exchange, every diplomatic meeting, every time you thought you were gathering intelligence on helpless humans, we were gathering intelligence right back. The remaining Zephyrians were starting to look around nervously, perhaps finally noticing that their overwhelming numerical advantage had somehow become significantly less overwhelming. Several of their colleagues were no longer standing, though the smoke and energy discharge had concealed exactly when and how they'd fallen. The 23 seconds of visual cover, Martinez continued, gave me time to use techniques that your species hasn't encountered before. Turns out, when you spend centuries fighting each other in increasingly creative ways, you develop some interesting skills. Lieutenant Pike sat up from where he'd been playing unconscious, stretching like someone waking from a pleasant nap. How many did you get, Captain? 6, Martinez replied. Could have been more, but I wanted to leave some for questioning. General Krex's forearms were shaking now, though he was trying to maintain some semblance of military bearing. This is, you couldn't have, our intelligence was perfect. Your intelligence, Dr. Walsh said, still chuckling, consisted of watching us wave at trade ships and offer cookies at diplomatic receptions. If you'd actually studied human military history, you might have noticed that we're really good at killing things that threaten us. Tech specialist Boomer looked up from his wall panel with the satisfied expression of someone who'd just finished a particularly tricky crossword puzzle. Station defenses are back online, Captain. Funny thing about those ceremonial weapons, they work really well as door keys when you reverse the polarity. The human prisoners were no longer looking much like prisoners. They were armed now, having apparently spent the last few minutes constructing weapons from station components while everyone was distracted by the light show. You see, Martinez explained to the increasingly pale Zephyrians, the thing about humans is that we're collaborative problem solvers. While you were focused on me, they were solving the problem of being unarmed in a hostile situation. Commander Zilt finally found his voice. How did you know we would betray the agreement? Martinez looked at him with the expression usually reserved for people who asked why water was wet. Any species capable of interstellar travel should probably invest in better encryption. We've been reading your communications since your second friendly contact. General Krex, to his credit, tried one last time to salvage the situation. It was like watching someone try to fix a sinking submarine with duct tape, admirable in its futility, pathetic in its execution. Surely we can negotiate, he said. His forearms spread in what was probably meant to be a peaceful gesture but looked more like someone trying to surrender in 4 different languages simultaneously. There's been a misunderstanding. Perhaps we could discuss terms of mutual cooperation? Martinez tilted her head with the expression of someone watching a particularly entertaining comedy show. Oh, now you want to negotiate? That's interesting. 5 minutes ago you were lecturing us about human inferiority and planning to broadcast my execution across the galaxy. Ambassador Thornwick, who had been silent during the recent festivities, stepped forward. Amazingly, he was still trying to be diplomatic. Captain Martinez, perhaps we should consider their request for dialogue. After all, violence should always be a last resort. Ambassador, Martinez replied patiently, they literally just tried to murder me. We're well past last resort and firmly into enthusiastic application of consequences territory. Captain Torres chose that moment to arrive with reinforcements, which was timing so perfect it seemed scripted. The airlock cycled open to reveal 30 heavily armed humans who moved with the kind of precision that suggested they'd been doing this for a while. Right on schedule, Torres announced cheerfully. How's the diplomatic reception going? About as well as expected, Martinez replied. We're currently in the explaining to the aliens why their plan was doomed from the start phase of the evening's entertainment. Admiral Zhao's voice crackled over the communication system with the satisfied tone of someone whose careful planning had just paid off spectacularly. Captain Martinez, this is Admiral Zhao. I trust our guests are enjoying their introduction to human hospitality? General Krex stared at the communications panel as if it had just insulted his mother. Admiral? How many ships do you have out there? Enough, came the laconic reply. We've been monitoring this situation since your fleet entered the system. Interesting tactical formation, by the way, perfect for a coordinated surrender. Commander Zilt's remaining confidence evaporated like water on a hot skillet. You were expecting us? Expecting you? Dr. Walsh laughed. We invited you. Did you really think that anonymous intelligence about human weaknesses just happened to fall into your hands? That your secret surveillance of our activities went unnoticed? Martinez began pacing, clearly enjoying the educational opportunity. See, here's the thing about humans, we're paranoid. Centuries of trying to kill each other taught us to assume everyone's out to get us. When we met you friendly aliens, our first thought wasn't hooray, space friends. It was what's the catch? The catch, Ensign Cooper added, consulting his datapad, according to your own psychological profiles, was that you saw us as weak because we smile and offer food to strangers. Apparently, hospitality equals vulnerability in Zephyrian tactical doctrine. So we gave you what you wanted to see, tech specialist Boomer explained. Harmless humans with minimal defenses and trusting natures. We even threw in some fake intelligence about our military capabilities, just to make the bait more appealing. General Krex looked around at his remaining forces, 3 Zephyrians facing 30 armed humans plus whatever fleet Admiral Zhao had brought to the party. The math was no longer working in his favor. This is all very educational, Torres said, but we have other appointments. Admiral Zhao, what's the current disposition of our guest's fleet? Surrounded and requesting permission to surrender, came the reply. Apparently they've reconsidered their assessment of human military capabilities. Martinez smiled at the remaining Zephyrians. Any last questions about human inferiority? 6 months later, Captain Riley Martinez stood at the podium of the Galactic Military Academy, addressing a mixed audience of human and alien military officers. The topic of today's lecture was applied diplomacy, a case study in assumptions and their consequences. The key thing to understand, Martinez was explaining, is that successful deception requires giving your target exactly what they expect to see. The Zephyrians expected weak, trusting humans, so that's what we showed them. In the front row, former General Krex, now serving as a cultural liaison in what was technically protective custody, raised one of his 4 hands. His new title was impressive, but everyone knew it was diplomatic speak for high-value prisoner who cooperates in exchange for decent meals and access to the station's library. Yes, General? Martinez acknowledged. I still don't understand how you anticipated our psychological profile so accurately, Krex said. Our behavior patterns should have been completely alien to human understanding. Dr. Walsh, serving as today's guest lecturer, stepped forward with the patient expression of someone explaining basic math to a particularly slow student. General, you made the classic mistake of assuming your species was unique. Humans have been dealing with bullies, predators, and would-be conquerors for millennia. Thus the specifics change, but the psychology remains remarkably consistent. Ambassador Thornwick, who had somehow managed to keep his job despite his spectacularly poor threat assessment, raised his hand. In retrospect, I realize my optimism may have been excessive. But surely maintaining hope for peaceful resolution isn't entirely misguided? Ambassador, Martinez replied with surprising gentleness, your excessive optimism was perfect cover for our actual preparations. Sometimes the best way to hide a military operation is behind someone who genuinely believes in diplomatic solutions. President Chen's voice came through the communication system from Earth. Captain Martinez, I trust our guests have been properly educated about human diplomatic practices? Thoroughly, Madam President. I believe they've gained a new appreciation for the complexity of interspecies relations. Former General Krex stood up, his bearing still military despite his changed circumstances. But if I may address the class directly? Martinez nodded permission. The lesson here, Krex said, is never assume that a species' public behavior reflects their true capabilities. Humans smile, offer food, and express hope for peaceful coexistence. This led us to conclude they were naive and defenseless. He paused, looking around the room at the mixed audience of potential future adversaries and allies. We were catastrophically wrong. Humans smile because they're confident in their ability to handle threats. They offer food because they can afford to be generous with their resources. They hope for peace because they're very, very good at war. Martinez checked her chronometer and smiled. Speaking of which, I have a new assignment starting next week. First contact with the Hegemony Coalition, who've been making some interesting claims about human expansion into their territory. She pulled up a tactical display showing the Coalition's fleet movements and territorial claims. According to their public statements, they believe humans are soft because we haven't won any major conflicts recently. Apparently, they think our diplomatic successes indicate military weakness. The mixed audience of military officers began taking notes with the intensity of people who recognized they were witnessing history repeat itself. Same basic psychology, Martinez continued. Different species. They see cooperation and assume vulnerability. They interpret restraint as inability. They mistake wisdom for weakness. Former General Krex actually looked sympathetic as he watched the tactical display. They have no idea what they're walking into, do they? None whatsoever, Martinez confirmed cheerfully. But that's fine. Some species apparently need to learn the hard way that when humans say we come in peace, the unspoken addendum is but we're prepared for war. She closed her presentation with a slide showing humanity's current diplomatic status, 17 successful first contacts, 12 peaceful trade agreements, 3 minor territorial disputes resolved through negotiation, and 1 object lesson in why you shouldn't mistake human hospitality for human helplessness. Class dismissed, Martinez announced. And remember, in interspecies relations, it's not paranoia if they really are out to get you. It's just good planning. As the audience filed out, Martinez gathered her materials and prepared for her next assignment. Somewhere in the Hegemony Coalition's territory, another group of aliens was probably planning humanity's subjugation based on carefully misinterpreted intelligence. She smiled and started planning humanity's next peaceful diplomatic mission, muttering under her breath, "Some species never learn." The final entry in her mission report read, "The human reputation successfully updated from harmless primitives to those psychotic apes who smile while they dismantle your entire civilization. Recommend maintaining current diplomatic protocols." After all, it was working perfectly.